Shalom and welcome to Life Lessons, and we are on segment 46. Going from the beginning, we started with Bereshit in Genesis, and now we're in the book of Deuteronomy, Devarim. The third one, EIKEV, parshat EIKEV. And I would like to start first with an interesting story that I heard not long ago. There's a famous musician. He's blind from birth. He's a British jazz pianist. George Shearing is his name. And he was once being interviewed on television when the interviewer asked him, "Have you been blind all your life?" And he answered, "Not yet." That's a very optimistic response. And that's a very important statement. So in other words, and that's really what we have to realize in whatever situation that we find ourselves, never to feel like this is it and there's no way out. So not yet, that there's a good chance I may see the light, is a very important answer. Also, they say a very interesting parable about two tailors, Shmerel and Beryl, and they were in synagogue. And as you know, in some synagogues, the custom is in the evening, between the evening prayers, that they learn what we call in EIKEV some stories of the Talmud. And the rabbi was teaching, and he was telling them that the Jewish belief is that when the Messiah will come, in our Jewish belief, that we believe that one day Mashiach will come, and when Mashiach will come, there's going to be such a miracle, God willing, that even there will be the resurrection of the dead. Known in Hebrew, Techiyat HaMeitim. Actually, the Maimonides had put it in one of his 13 principles, that we believe with perfect faith that one day everyone will come back and be alive. So as they're walking out from synagogue, so Shmerel and Beryl, as I mentioned, the two tailors, turns to him, "Did you hear what the rabbi said? You know what that means for our business. We are going to become millionaires." The Beryl looks at him, "Why do you say that?" Says, "Don't you know? They don't get buried with clothes. All with shrouds, and so when they come up, they're all going to need to have clothes. So imagine, millions of people, resurrection of the dead, we're going to be busy and making a lots of money." Says to him, Beryl, "Listen, my friend, but you're right what you're saying, but don't you realize amongst all those people that have passed on, there's quite a lot of tailors. So when those are going to resurrect, there's going to be a lot of tailors. What do you think? Why do you think we're going to have the business?" So Shmuel tells them, "Beryl, don't worry about it. They don't know the new styles. So we always have to be up on the new styles. And the point of that is that even when a person finds himself in a situation that he doesn't know what is going to be, he's a tailor, for example, always optimistic, always thinking, what could we do, what could we create, what could happen. And especially this idea, or the story from before of not yet, or here, knowing the style, the same thing is what I find very interesting when we read the Torah, that even though the Torah was given over 3,300 years ago, but it is according to the times. Nothing has changed. And you go back in the Torah and you look, it's all life, and it's like today. Everything is applicable and everything is very important. And with that, we go into this section over here that is known Parashat EIKEV. And right in the beginning, the verse begins by saying, "V'haya EIKEV tishmeun," and it will be that if, as a result, that if you would listen to what God is telling you, and you will keep everything, then God says He will keep His promise. He will keep His covenant, His kindness, what He swore to your fathers. And He will fulfill all the following blessing. So we see it's like a two-way relation. God is saying, if you listen, then I will keep my promise. And it goes a whole bunch of praises over here. I will love you, I will bless you, I will multiply you, a whole bunch of things. And then in verse 14, this is in chapter 7, verse 14, he says, Baruch tiyeh mikol ha'amim, you will be blessed above all the nations, that all the nations will be looking up to you. This is the idea where in other places it says that we have our responsibility of being a role model for the rest of the world. So here it says we should be blessed amongst all the nations. And this is something very interesting because this is, as we're soon going to see, is a little bit different than we find in other places. Like for example, when they were coming out of Egypt, and we know that they were like slaves, and they were slaves, and then they were saved. So when it's written after the splitting of the Red Sea, and we were all praising God for all the miracles that has happened. So the expression is that the nations, those that didn't like the Jews at that time, got afraid. All of a sudden they realized that these people are God's people, and you have to be careful. And as we know, when they came into Israel, everyone was afraid. But the expression is Tipol alehem ema. A fear will fall on them. If a fear falls on a certain person, means they're not ready to bless you. They're just afraid of you, but not ready to bless you. Here he talks about where the nations of the world are blessing. You shall be blessed. That's a whole different thing. Many times I feel that myself. There'll be some individuals that's walking the street and somebody will say, you are from the Jewish people, you shall be blessed. I guess the verse in Genesis told Abraham, and God told him, whoever you bless shall be blessed, and the opposite, whoever curse you should be cursed. But the main idea, we're concentrating on the idea of blessing. So the point of that is that there is sometimes a situation where the person is not ready to make peace with the situation or to accept the situation, but they are afraid and that's why they just keeping quiet. Or no, they want to understand what's happening over here and they're happy and they're ready to cooperate and to help out. So that's an interesting difference that we see from before till we come over here. But here the name in Hebrew is EIKEV. EIKEV in Hebrew is a heel. So in this connotation over here, it means because. Many expressions in Hebrew are double expressions. The word EIKEV, where it's over here, means, and because you will listen, but then also means the idea of a heel. What's the idea of a heel? So the idea of a heel is, so the commentator Rashi tells us that this is talking about we should even telling us we should be careful with the commandments that sometimes a person steps on it with his heel. The verse suggests that you will heed even the minor commandments which a person tends to trample with his heels. That's the idea. You trample with your heels, but something is not important. Okay, it's not noticeable. You're going to step in it with your heel. So a person is going to start making differentiations between what's the difference between certain commentaries, certain commandments. This commandment makes sense, I will keep it. This one, no, I don't think God even said such a thing. And no, this one I'll do, this one I don't know. When you start with these kind of things, so that already creates a situation. Or even, and here's something very interesting, a person says to himself, you know, if it's a strict commandment, I don't want to start up about this. But if it's a minor one, big deal if I didn't do it. God will overlook. And what he's telling you over here, be careful with those commandments that you may step on it with your heel. And that's a very important point over here. So it's bringing out the situation how we need to be aware about what's going on and to be attentive even to those minor commandments. But what is the expression over here? The expression is, and what will happen is, as a result of you listening to these laws. The expression is here, listening. We talked last time about this, the difference between listening and seeing. And again over here, it's talking about to listen. And this is something very important because as we're soon going to see, this comes out the difference between listening, that maybe it's a little bit further removed, than seeing that this is something close. However, there's something more effective by listening, that it becomes part of you. When you see something, it's like almost imposed at you. You're walking, you didn't intend, and all of a sudden you see something. You were not prepared to see it. This was not part of your plan to see it. You saw it. Okay, so at that moment it's overwhelming. But it could very easily be later on. It's just gone what you have seen. You're not at the scene of what you have seen all the time. But if you're listening, especially with the deeper meaning of listening, you studied, you researched, you understood, you listening, then it becomes part of you. There's a very interesting thing in the Talmud. I don't know how it is in secular law, but in Talmud they say that the faculty of listening, the ear, is much stronger than the eyes. It says if God forbid someone damaged another person in their eye, so you have to pay the worth of their eye. But if you damage somebody in their ears, it's written then you have to pay the whole worth of the human being, because listening is something that the ear is connected something much deeper. In other words, it's explained that when a person doesn't see, there's still a lot of things that they could do. But if they can't hear, it's even worse. So it's interesting, even though we tend to believe that seeing is much more powerful. However, the results of things and what could be done, and in a deeper meaning also the idea of understanding, I hear you, I understand, when it comes with the word of listening. So here we see something very interesting. There's that famous prayer that we have in our prayers every day, and we actually say it twice a day, in the morning and then in the night prayer, and that is Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear Israel, God is our God, God is one. And this is one of the famous prayers of us, the Jewish people. And as we all know the stories, when people were forced, and they were forced to give away their lives during all these terrible things that happened in our history, we always read about when they passed away or they were executed, when they were killed. This is the words that we're saying. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear Israel, God is one. And continues with a very important paragraph that was in the last week's segment in the parashat Va'etchanan. It says, and you should love your God with all your heart, and with your soul, and with your might. 3 expressions. This is what it said in the last week's section. And then it said as follows: you shall teach your children. So it talks about the idea of teaching them Torah. And then it talks about, and you should tie it on your hands and between your eyes. So that's the phylacteries that we wear. That represents the mitzvot, the commandments, the physical commandments that we need to do. So because in our relationship with God, it's 2 things. One is studying, and one is the actual of doing. So here, he says, first of all, he says, number 1, you should love your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your might. And then he goes into details, that you should study, and then talks about the action that needs to be done. But in this section, what we are now in the segment 46 of parshat EIKEV, it repeats again this idea, but over here he begins by saying, and it will be when you listen to my commandments, the idea of listening, and that should bring you to love God with all your heart and with all your soul. The idea of might is not mentioned, and also it's not written as singular, but as plural, with all your hearts and with all your souls. And then, interesting enough, in the previous segment, it was just facts. Didn't go in reward or punishment. But here, he does go in, he says, and if you do this, the rain will come in its time, you'll have what to eat, and God forbid, if you don't listen, God will be upset, and these things might happen. But then he continues to say, you should put all these to your heart, all these words, and you should tie it on your hands. And then it says about teaching. So all of a sudden over here, he's speaking about the doing before the studying. Just do the commandments, and then it says about teaching your children. So again, in this section over here, he said you should love with all your hearts and all your souls in plural, and did not mention might. And also over here, he talked about reward and punishment that before he didn't mention it. And here, he talks about first the idea of commandments, to do it, and then about studying. And earlier on, first it was about studying, and then about the commandment. So it's explained that this is the difference when we talk about seeing and hearing. The previous segment is talking where Moshe, Rabbeinu, our teacher, was trying to elevate the people into a higher level. And when we talk about a higher level, then every individual is different. Every individual, it's according to their level, how they're advancing in their relationship. And in that kind of a situation, yes, there is with your heart, with your soul, and then there is with your might, because now you're on a whole different level. And that's important to understand. In our section over here, it's talking in plural, because this is to the community. This is a community effort. And when it's the community effort, then the emphasis is more on the hearts and on the souls. And here's something very interesting, what it is mentioned about hearts, because it says over here in plural. But also that to each person, their hearts, what is it? So they tell us that in every person there's two drive. Like almost saying that there's two hearts, even we know there's one heart. But in the heart of every human being, there's an amazing thing. There's a drive to do positive, and there's a drive to do negative. So when we talk about with all your hearts, with all your drives, that you need to not just to subdue the negative, but you need that the negative should become a friend. You need to transform the situation where the negative, what we call the evil inclination, is ready to help out. Not only he's laying low and he's waiting for an opportunity when he could convince the person to sin. No, you had convinced or you had changed the attitude of the evil inclination till he's ready to help. Now it's interesting, another interesting point what our sages tell us about this section over here. That says over here, why is he talking about the commandments and again the studying Torah? It says, this Rashi quotes something interesting. This is talking about even at the time when we were exiled from Israel. When we were exiled from Israel, so he's telling us, even when you are not where there is the temple, you also should keep your commandments, learn Torah and do mitzvahs. In other words, When we spoke earlier in last week's segments about studying Torah and doing mitzvot, so obviously we're talking when everyone is in a much higher level. Everyone is behaving, the temple is standing there, we were all together in Israel, so obviously then the doing of the commandments was something very natural, so we're going the order from above to below. From above to below comes the studying. You study Torah, and that automatically leads to the result of doing. You study and you do. And it goes with all these steps that we saw, with your soul, with your heart, with your might. And he doesn't talk about reward and punishment, because it's not needed. As we all know, and the hope is that way, that when we are children and when we were young, that's more or less when we heard the idea, don't do this, you may get punished, or even with our modern psychology, whatever nice words they found how to describe it, but still the idea is that we talk about, if you do this, you'll get that, and if you do this, you may not get your reward, or whatever you want to call it. And the hope is that as we mature, we understand, and we don't need to be told again and again. I find very interesting, a lot of times you'll hear from parents, especially young parents are just starting, they don't realize, because they had forgotten how they were when they were younger, how you're supposed to repeat so many times. I say, what is this? Didn't I tell you once? But it doesn't work that way. You do need to repeat and repeat and repeat, because not necessarily it registers by the child exactly what you want from them. And you have to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. Eventually, the hope is, as they mature, and then less and less has to be talked about reward and punishment, and the person understands what the beauty of everything is and what the beauty of the positive is. So therefore, when we are in a level of seeing, I'm going back to this idea, the seeing of and listening, and hearing, listening. Seeing represents a very high level. But here's something very interesting from that level of seeing. When that level of seeing is, I don't need to be told about reward and punishment. Because if I could say such a thing, I see the glory of God. I see what the truth is. I don't need to be told. But from that point of view, something very interesting. Yes, it's true, the studying, the actually doing of the commandments. But however, there's a little bit of being removed from all this. Why? My excitement is because I am seeing. What happens if I don't see? All of a sudden, I go crazy. In other words, some need to be reminded all the time. I need to be in a situation where I could see it. If I don't see it, it confuses me, and it's becoming harder. So in other words, so when a person is in a high level, constantly in a high level, then everything is perfect, everything is fine. But what happens when you're not in a high level? Or to put it this way, it's very simple. We could take an example in our day-by-day life. When things go well, when thank God everything is okay, then everything around us also feels wonderful. But when we have sometimes challenges and things are not easy, it's interesting, that's the nature of the person. Then he's looking at everyone else also that things are no good. If a person is not happy, then he thinks everyone else is not happy. And then when we are in a negative mood, or as people love to say, when we are down, then we think everyone is down. And then the whole world is down. Everything is no good. When we are in a mood of complaining, the complaints don't stop. But if the person feels good about themselves, Everything is wonderful. Even there's a little bit of a challenge there. Okay, that's not the end of the world. So a lot depends how we look on things. So if a person only sees, so the minute he doesn't see, he can get all confused. But if a person understood, he's listening, it got into him, and now he understands the detail, so you could be in an island where nobody is there, and you could be strong in your Judaism. In other words, this is what the idea of the listening is, of the hearing. That whatever situation we find ourselves, that's why it says over here, even after we are exiled, we should still do all these things. We shouldn't think to ourselves, I only do it when there's a temple. Like we all know, there's a lot of people think that I am only religious when I'm in the house of service, house of worship. If I'm not in the house of worship, maybe I don't have to be religious. To be religious, to be observant, is a 24/7 situation. It's not just the few hours for us Jewish people on when we show up in synagogue, and for others when they go Sunday in their houses of worship. It's not just all of a sudden those few hours I become very serious and I am very religious. But the minute I walk out of the house of worship, that's it. I'm ready to do other things. That means that the seeing didn't have an effect. And to say even more so, you're not listening. Hasn't penetrated. So therefore exists over here the possibility that maybe when I'm exiled from Israel and I'm away from where the temple is and all this, maybe I don't have to do all these things. That's why over here in this section, it tells us with the words, and if you would listen to what I'm saying, and then it goes to the reward and punishment, and then it comes to something very important. When I come to that level, I have to know that the main thing is to do the commandments. And then I'm studying. You know, a lot of times we have this debate. Should I study first or should I learn first? Should I do it or learn first? Here they tell us very simple. We always have to do things. We do it and then we study to find out, and that's what helps us. So this parasha with the name EIKEV, it helps us to tell us that even when we are in a heel situation, far and removed from the head, we're very careful what we step on, and we do what God wants from us, and that helps us that very soon we will be with Mashiach Tzidkenu, and the not yet will be in front of our eyes because we won't be blind. Thank you.